And then we'll get our nice receiver over here. Remember, we're going to hook it up to battery negative. We're also going to do the positive side. So I forgot that we didn't do that yet. So it's all going to come full circle like a circuit. Put this through here. And kind of see, remember, battery negative over here. So public service announcement, because I almost did this, and so I'm going to make you guys aware of this. This is kind of important, okay? You see this here? You don't have to know what this is, but this is important, okay? This circular thing here. But one thing you gotta know is that you do not want to connect these metal parts to these metal pads together. You know why? And Ms. Cotton or your teacher should have told you this. That's going to create a short. And if you kind of look here, let me see if it's good if I zoom in. It's a little blurry, but you kind of get the point, okay? So you can see that there's a little space in between the metal connection that goes to the circular portion. I don't have my tweezers. Let me use this. It goes from the circular portion, this part right here, and this pad. Do not, and I say this with love, okay? Do not short these. Make sure that there is a gap, a good gap between the positive terminal for the battery and this, and also do the same for the negative portion. My soldering skills may not be the best, so there may be more solder than usual. If it seems like you're afraid of connecting them, just don't. As in, like, just do enough just to cover it and be good. This is so we don't have issues down the line in connection, which we're probably going to, but I don't want that to be an issue. Public service announcement over. And we'll continue soldering. Let it sit there on top. Dry. Ooh. Now we're cooking. So you can kind of see, like, I have some extra wire that is a tad exposed. I would probably not do this, where I would make sure when you put this on that there's not that much exposing. It's going to be exposed anyway, but just to be sure, try to make this portion as short as possible. You know, not to have this exposed, so that it looks a little bit more like the model. You can kind of see the red portions and the black portion as well. There's not much like exposed, just to make sure you don't have a short. But for demo purposes, as long as I said it, I can legally say that it's not my fault. And this one's being more cooperative. There we go. This one's a little better. Pretty good, pretty good. Okay, so this is what you got so far. Let me zoom out. Cool, cool. So everything's hooked up. Again, your battery just hooks up like that. Alright, let's go to the next one. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next step. Next, we're going to do the brushless motor and then attaching it to your ESC right here. Now, here is a big public service announcement for you guys. So, if you are going to use your brushless motor in a way with the design that I made for this hole here, right? I made you do this hole because it essentially keeps your wires out of range from their opponent. So they're not able to nick you and then disconnect you, right? But it's also for your own benefit if you design it this way, because the weapon goes directly on top of the motor, right? And so you wouldn't want that to hit. And so that's why it's nice and snug against the bottom of the bot. So this is going to be very useful if you design this way. And even if you didn't design this way, it just would be useful to go ahead and, do this practice. Go ahead and take the amalgamation that I made you do and go ahead and plant that in here. And this will be your portion of time in which you can guess and check, did I make my wires long enough? And if they're too long, how can I, fasten them down if they're not as bendy as mine? Maybe use some zip ties or some hot glue if you want. Actually, don't use hot glue. Don't do that. Because something's bound to go wrong. Don't do that until you know for sure that your robot's going to work. And we'll see about that. But either way, go ahead and assemble it, put them in their proper place, bolt this down, everything, make sure your N20 motors are bolted down and be good. And then go ahead when you have your brushless motor and attach it. I had screw holes designed, so it was easy to attach. But whatever way you ended up attaching your motor, go ahead and do that. And then we'll talk about how to do this. Now, if you design this hole, and even if you didn't design this hole, it's going to be for everybody. Notice that I have these like stubs here. Now, when I bought these brushless motors, I bought them and they were intended for people with drones. Now, you may think that, we can't use it because it's for drones. That's not true. It's just going to be very easy. So you're going to take your wire cutters and you're just going to cut those off. The electrical connections are still useful even if you don't have the stubs. The stubs are just there for convenience for the types of people who use the drones and stuff like that. So we're going to cut it just beneath the big bulge right there. I'm going to keep a little bit of it like so. Actually, now that I think about it, we're going to go ahead and take this upper, risen black part right here. You can kind of see. We're going to go ahead and get rid of that. And if you think that it's going to be too short to connect, don't worry. We're going to compensate for that. Just hang on in the video. Snip. And snap. There we go. Now we're going to do what we had done before, and we're going to strip them and expose them. Sorry, that's blurry. Trying to get a good, I don't want to strip off too much. There's only so much of this wire. So be very careful not to strip off too much. It's not like we have more of this. And just make sure you don't strip off way too much than you need. Maybe a little more difficult because the insulator around the wire is a little more stretchy than what you might have had previously. So mine's kind of tripping up. It's kind of hard to catch on. You may have different types of wire strippers where it's like the holes going vertically, which may be a little easier. I'm not sure, but just kind of work at it. But they're nice and exposed like this. Now, maybe you messed up and made them a little too short and they're like up here, as long as it's not too much, okay? If that happened, then don't worry about it. So what we're going to solve that right now. So we're going to take some wire and we're going to denote this with red. Or whatever color you have. It's not really that big of a deal. And we're just going to extend the length to wherever your ESC is. So if you decide, you're just going to have the ESC hanging out here, you can kind of see from the model here that the black wires is exactly the type of motor that was on it. But there are these red wires here. That was added on by this. The red wire compensates for the rest of the distance to the ESC. So I'm just going to do that just for demonstration purposes. We're going to cut 3 wires of the same length. Okay. So same deal. We're going to go ahead and strip on both sides. Okay, so I have our 3 wires. Some of them are a little shorter because it was like the insulator was sliding around when I was trying to strip it. But that would be solved by using heat shrink, which I encourage you guys to use. I don't know where my heat shrink went, the extra ones I have, but you should have some extras from Miss Coffee. I'm going to give to her, or Miss Cotton. Miss Cotton should have her maybe, I don't know. But essentially, if you're going to use the heat shrink, go ahead and slide it on to your brushless motor. So slide it this way and do that for all 3, so they're all just kind of sitting right here. And this is just so like after you connect everything to the ESC, you know you have a way to just like slip it back on there. So keep that in mind, and we'll go ahead and solder these connections. It's a little more difficult because you don't really have a reference. Again, if you have multiple people, help each other, just kind of like hold it down. Like that, so it's connecting. And then have the other person solder. And just be careful that you don't just be careful that you don't burn each other's fingers. Or in my case, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to use some electrical tape. It'll be easy. We're just gonna tape this down. And then I'm just gonna kind of isolate this one because it needs to be soldered. And I'm also gonna solder the wire in question. Oh. Let me see, they're just kind of connecting just a bit. Wouldn't be a bad idea is to use a soldering pad or something underneath so it doesn't burn the table. But this table has been weathered, so it's not a big deal for me. But let's just make sure to heat up the wire where they meet. Make sure they do meet. Yeah, have a soldering pad. Let that kind of dry, or else it's just going to be a bulbous mess. I'm going to smooth it out a bit. Let that dry, let it cool down. It's just a hot mess right now. It should be connected like that. Sorry, it's blurry. It should be connected like that. Take this off. Gotta move it out the side, and then isolate the other one. If they get in the way, just kind of like you can just like move this one out the way. Again, this would be easier if you have a partner. So we're gonna do the next one. Okay, so you should have it like this. Remember the heat shrink that I told you about should be around here. Just move that over. You can see I have more exposed wire than I intended. If this happens and your heat shrink is too short, you still have the ends here. Either get some longer heat shrink, or you can just start over with the same process and just try to get it to where it doesn't strip off as much. So after you heat shrink this portion so these wires are not exposed, now what you're going to do is bolt this on to your robot. So just like this. And you're going to, if you have this design, put the wires through the hole, and it should all look like this. Now when everything's bolted down, you should have your ESC ready. And we're going to get into that stuff. So, assuming that you have your motor mounted and your heat shrunk, we're going to go ahead and connect your ESC. Now, it may be a little more difficult, especially if you have it already bolted down, and the wires might be shorter, and you might need to have each other. You may need to help each other in order to get in there. So it's a little bit more difficult to kind of solder this way when it's already mounted down, but you guys will work it out. So essentially, it does not matter which wires go with which pins. So we're just gonna do it randomly. We'll start with this one. Kind of get up against. I know the light's kind of bad. Let me zoom in. Kind of get up against the insulator as much as you can. If there's extras, kind of like there is for mine, this little part, you can always cut that extra off. But let's go ahead and solder this first one. And the second one. And then the last one. Sorry, I'm moving around a lot. Okay, so let's solder this last one. Sorry, it's bending that way. Alright. We'll just kind of jiggle it around. Don't be afraid to cut off these extra parts back here. But let's just pretend they're not there. Okay, so theoretically, this all should be in your robot currently. And then once you've got that done, we'll move on to the extra connections. So, if we look back at the model, this red wire at the other end is going to connect to the positive battery terminal on the PCB, the receiver. I know it's kind of blurry, but you see BAT+. That's also what we did for battery connector. So yes, there's going to be 2 wires on this pad right here. And to move this to the side and show you what I mean, let me bring this back over here. And you can see where it says battery 2. Now, just to save space, it's probably a good idea to maybe solder one on one side or one on the other if it's a little tricky to get to the receiver in your robot. But it doesn't really matter. You can also go on top with it. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Just be cognizant of where you attach your wires so they don't get too tangled. You can see there's a little bit exposed. Just keep that the way it is. This silicone is just really stretchy and it's going to be hard for the wire cutter to get at. So just work with what you got. And if it doesn't reach, then you can do the same method and use where we extended the wires for the brushless motor, kind of here, so you can perform the same method. It's actually pretty good considering that there's already solder in here, so you just got to heat this back up. If it doesn't heat back up too well, put a little bit more solder. Just gotta make a bit of a mound there. Not too much though. Just heat that back up. And then connect it while it's being heat back up. And then take it away. Maybe. Again, this is be very helpful if you had a partner. So you can see that I made a connection. It's stuck on there. And just to be safe, put a little bit more solder on top. Just make sure it doesn't short itself with the capacitor over there to the left. There we go. Just make sure everything is connected. So let's do a little game. Where do you think the black wire on the ESC goes to? And you would be correct if you guessed the negative terminal of the negative terminal of the battery on the receiver. Sorry, guys, I'm tired. So right over here. Kind of the same process. Put a little more solder on there to account for the new wire coming in. Just make sure not to short the other side. And if you feel like you might short and put too much solder, don't be afraid to put it on the other side, the back side of the PCB, because there is a spot there. But just in case space doesn't entail that, we're going to do the top side. All right, heat that up. We're actually going to put a little more solder because it's still not heating up to account for that. There we go. There you go. It's connected, and we'll just put a little more on top. And it's connected. Okay. Again, this should all be in your robot currently. Do it a little bit trial and error. If you did the same process here, make sure you put the heat shrink on before. Or if you don't have any heat shrink that fits over this like more silicone-y feeling insulator, get electrical tape kind of like here. And that kind of goes with, these wires right here. If you don't have heat shrink, just use electrical wire. It serves the same purpose. Okay, so the only other portion that's left is this black and white wire. Okay, so for the last part with the ESC, you see this black and white wire. So all you gotta do is take your wire cutters and disconnect this entire thing. You don't need it. There we go. And we're gonna unravel these black and white wires. Like so. Kind of come over these from here. Cool. Now, and this is very important, you're going to cut this black wire. There you go. You don't need that, so you're going to throw that away. But you will keep the white wire. Now, it may be a little difficult, but you're going to go ahead and strip this as best you can. There you go. It's a little frayed, but that's okay. And kind of same situation that we did with the brushless motor. And the other portion is the ESC if you had to do that. If you need something longer for your robot, get wire. For this, we're going to take the white wire and we are going to put it on W1 on your receiver. So you can see there's W1 right there. This first one right next to the negative battery terminal. Same deal. If you have a partner, this is going to be easy for you. If not, tape it down so that it stays in place. It's on there pretty good. And you are done. Now, mind you, this is outside the robot for me, but this should all be mounted down. And there is the nervous system of your robot. And thank you for watching.